Jude Obasa wasn't just rich, he was mercilessly powerful. A man carved from concrete and ambition, molded by the streets of Mushin, but hardened in the fires of his own ego. Now he stood as the CEO of Obasa Empire Holdings, with fingers deep in oil, construction, banking, and tech. They called him the Odogwu of capital, the man who could make or break a politician with one call. But if God was known for mercy, Jude was famous for the absence of it. He never forgot his poor roots, but not in the way people expect. He didn't use his past to build others. He used it as fuel to crush them. He ran his empire with fear. Staff didn't resign, they escaped. Security men bowed so low their backs cracked. Once he fired a pregnant accountant during a meeting just because she yawned. "My money is feeding that child, and yet you look tired," he said, sipping champagne. When an old classmate from Mushin, now a struggling mechanic, approached him at an event, Jude had the man thrown out for smelling like grease. On social media, he was worshipped by sycophants and influencers who knew their next rent might come from his random giveaway, but in reality, he had never given to charity. Not once. Not a school built. Not a widow helped. Just luxury cars, wild parties, and headlines that screamed, "Obasa buys fifth mansion in Banana Island." One day, while driving past a beggar, his convoy was forced to slow down. The man, blind and limping, reached toward Jude's tinted Rolls-Royce. Jude rolled down the window, took a N100 note, lit it with a cigar, and let the ashes fall into the street. "You're lucky I even opened my window," he said with a smile. Everyone laughed. But far above, the sky was already gathering clouds. And if Jude had been paying attention, he would have noticed something chilling. For the first time in years, the laughter didn't reach his own ears. Jude Obasa thought his empire was immortal. But empires don't fall overnight. They rot from the inside quietly, slowly, until one sharp kick is enough to shatter the illusion. The rot began with greed, but not his alone. For years, Jude had surrounded himself with men like Uchenna Dyke, his CFO, clean suits, quiet voice, and dead eyes. Uchenna had one job: make the money move like magic, hide the dirty deals, disguise bribes as consulting fees, cook the books just enough to feed the media, but not the taxmen. And Jude, he never asked questions. As long as the private jets kept flying and the boardroom kept nodding, he was king. But in the shadows, Uchenna had grown tired of playing the servant. He wanted his own empire. It started with quiet fund diversions, 50 million here, and 100 million there. Then came fake shell companies, ghost projects, offshore accounts. For 5 years, he was bleeding Obasa Empire dry. And Jude didn't notice. Why would he? He was too busy bullying ministers, buying luxury estates in London, and silencing journalists with brown envelopes. Until one journalist didn't take the money. Linda Ayula, a firebrand investigative reporter, caught wind of a suspicious land deal in Kogi State where Obasa's company displaced 1,200 villagers without compensation. The village chief died during a protest. His widow gave Linda the documents. Jude didn't know it, but his own downfall had already been drafted in a USB stick. Linda's expose hit Twitter like fire on fuel. Tagged in thousands of posts, the EFCC couldn't ignore it. Within 48 hours, a deep forensic audit began. And guess whose name appeared on every fake contract? Jude Obasa. Uchenna vanished, fled the country with N8 billion in crypto. Meanwhile, Jude was hit with a tsunami of lawsuits, tax violations, and frozen assets. The banks locked every account. His company's shares dropped 60% in one morning. Foreign investors pulled out like rats from a sinking ship. Worse, the politicians he'd once controlled turned on him. They leaked photos, old emails, recordings. He was no longer useful. He was dangerous, a liability. On the third day, armed EFCC agents swarmed his Ikoyi mansion like a funeral procession in reverse. His staff, gone. His wife, filed for divorce that same hour. And Jude? He stood in his silk robe at the gates, watching them break open his empire with crowbars. "I built this," he whispered. But no one was listening anymore, because the king had fallen. and the world was already watching another throne? That's how long it took for Jude Obasa to go from billionaire kingpin to a ghost in his own city. His mansion was seized. His foreign accounts were drained. He had no access to cash, no friends willing to pick his calls, and not even a driver to take him across the bridge. The few loyalists he thought he had? They turned faster than a Lagos traffic light. Some even laughed at his downfall on Instagram Live. He tried calling his daughter. The number was disconnected. He tried walking into one of his own hotels just to sleep in a room. The receptionist barely glanced at him before saying, "Sorry, sir, we're fully booked," while scrolling through TikTok. Now Jude sat on a concrete bench in Oberlanda, wrapped in a borrowed hoodie that smelled like boiled beans and sweat. His eyes, once shielded by Gucci sunglasses, were red and dry. His feet, blistered from walking aimlessly through Lagos, throbbed in cracked loafers. And then came the moment. The moment every villain faces when the mask falls off. Rain. It came heavy, fast, and unrelenting Lagos rain that slapped like karma. Jude stood under a broken Danfo shelter, soaked to the bone, trembling. And that's when he saw her. A woman, short and stocky, selling roasted corn under a torn umbrella. She paused, stared. Her eyes narrowed with recognition. "You?" Jude turned slowly. The woman dropped her corn stick. "You're the one," she hissed. "You're the man who burned that in-100 note. My father cried that night. He died 2 weeks later. You mocked him." Jude couldn't speak. Not because he didn't remember, but because he finally did. And for the first time in his life, Jude Obasa lowered his head. Not in power, but in shame. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. His body ached. His stomach twisted in knots. The rain hadn't stopped, and neither had the whispers. Everywhere he went, someone seemed to recognize him, though no one stepped forward to help. They only stared, judged, smirked. Once he'd been escorted through cities with motorcades. Now he couldn't even enter a buka without being shoved aside. At a roadside food stand in Oberlegba, he reached shakily for a piece of akara that had fallen from the tray. The seller slapped his hand away. "No beef or riffraff. You dey mad?" The slap echoed louder than the generator behind them. Jude stumbled back, humiliated, eyes burning not with tears, but with fury. But who could he blame? The streets didn't respect Armani suits or luxury name tags. Out here, you earned your respect with scars, not stocks. He slept that night in front of a closed pharmacy, curled up beside 2 boys no older than 15. One offered him half a sachet of pure water. Jude hesitated, then drank it like it was aged whiskey. In that moment, something inside him broke, and something else started to form. But dawn brought danger. At 3:47 a.m., he was jolted awake by footsteps, fast, aggressive. 3 boys, no older than 20, faces hidden, blades drawn. "CM, big man day sleep for road now. Oya, your watch." He didn't have a watch, so they beat him anyway. Blood mixed with rain on the sidewalk as Jude curled into himself, taking each kick like a price for every sin he'd laughed at, every family he'd displaced, every poor man he'd humiliated. And then, a voice. "Leave am. You want kill person?" Someone had intervened. Someone familiar. As Jude opened one swollen eye, he saw the last person he ever expected to save him. Now, a man he'd destroyed. Jude coughed blood into his sleeve as the boys ran off, their laughter echoing down the alley like demons celebrating. The pain in his ribs pulsed like a war drum. His left eye was nearly swollen shut. He barely registered the figure crouching beside him. "I should have let them finish you." The voice was deep, cracked like dry wood. Familiar. Jude turned slowly. Samuel Ediemi, the former factory owner, a man Jude once crushed without blinking. Years ago, Sam owned a medium-sized plastic company in Abeokuta. He refused to sell when Obasa Holdings came knocking. Jude didn't negotiate. He bought the land next to Sam's plant, built a massive competing factory, bribed inspectors, sabotaged Sam's supply lines, and within months, the man was bankrupt. Last Jude heard, Sam's wife had left, his son dropped out of school, and he was sleeping in a church corridor. Now here he was, pulling Jude to his feet. "You remember me now, don't you?" Sam asked. Jude nodded, ashamed. Sam didn't smile. "I heard what happened. Karma's not just real, Obasa. She's a Lagos girl with high heels and bad intentions." "Why? Help me," Jude croaked. "Because when I was on the ground," Sam said, eyes cold, "a stranger fed me, not because I deserved it, but because someone had to stop the cycle." He wrapped Jude's arm over his shoulder and half-dragged, half-carried him into a small one-room kiosk behind a mechanic's workshop. The floor was hard. The air smelled like diesel, but it was shelter. And it was safe. "You'll stay here," Sam said, dropping a pack of paracetamol beside him. "But this isn't mercy." Jude frowned. Sam leaned in. "You want food? You'll work for it. You want healing? You'll earn it." He turned to leave. "Oh, and Jude," he added, "if I ever see that arrogant smirk again, I'll put you back in that gutter." The door shut behind him. Jude sat in the dark, ribs screaming, ego shattered. And for the first time, he wanted to change. Not for money, not for revenge, but because someone had shown him something he didn't know he needed: discipline. The next morning, Jude Obasa woke up on a thin mattress that smelled like diesel and regret. His ribs still ached, his pride was nowhere to be found, and his hands once used to sign Billionaire contracts, now trembled as he tried to tie worn-out boots. Samuel didn't speak when he arrived, just tossed him a pair of stained overalls and nodded toward the mechanic yard. "This is your new boardroom," Sam said flatly. Jude blinked. I don't know anything about engines." Sam chuckled without humor. "You'll learn or starve." And just like that, the man who once refused to shake the hands of security guards was now scrubbing oil off bolts, pushing dead cars into trenches, and getting barked at by mechanics half his age who didn't recognize him, or worse, did and didn't care. By noon, his shirt was soaked through. By 2 p.m., he had grease in his teeth. By 5 p.m., he had been shouted at by a teenage apprentice named Malik for ruining a carburetor. "You day useless, Oga. Not only your mouth day work before?" Jude said nothing. He scrubbed harder. When Sam returned in the evening, he handed Jude a plate of beans and gari. "No meat," he said. "You haven't earned meat." Jude sat on a low stool, eating slowly, quietly. The silence between them was thick, but not empty. It was heavy with transformation. "You still hate me?" Jude finally asked. Sam didn't answer immediately. "No," he said. "I hated the man you were. But that man's dead, isn't he?" Jude looked down at his oil-streaked palms. "I think he is." Sam stood. "Good. Then maybe tomorrow, you'll learn something that doesn't stink." As the door closed again, Jude realized something. For the first time in his life, he wasn't chasing profit. He was chasing purpose. The weeks rolled by like tires in the yard, rough, heavy, and full of grime. Jude Obasa was unrecognizable now. He worked 12-hour days at the mechanic shop, earned N1,000 a day, slept on the same thin mattress, and no longer flinched at the smell of petrol or the burn of sun on his neck. But just when he started believing he could build a new life from the scraps of the old one, the past found him. It started with a knock on the gate. A young woman in jeans, an afro puff, and confidence for days. She introduced herself with a smirk. Linda Ayula, journalist, the same one who had launched the investigation that burned his empire to the ground. "You look better without the Rolex," she said. Jude didn't flinch. "You here to finish the story?" She laughed. "No, I'm here to hear your side. The world wants blood. I want truth." Jude shook his head. "The truth is simple. I was a monster, and I got what I deserved." But Linda wasn't the only one watching. That same night, a black Prado SUV pulled up a few blocks from the shop. Inside sat a man with a gold chain, 3 phones, and a bitter snarl. And Tunde Alhaji Lawal, a former business associate, a silent investor in one of Jude's shadiest real estate deals, one that crumbled during the collapse, exposing Tunde and costing him over $200 million. He's still breathing? Tunde growled, watching Jude from a distance. Let's fix that. He made a call. Tell the boys, I want Obasa gone, quietly. No headlines, just disappear him. Back in the shop, Jude lay on his mattress, finally drifting to sleep after a long day of honest work, unaware that the same power he once used to crush others was now being turned against him. And this time there were no bodyguards, no walls, no exit, only fate, and a ticking clock. The moon hung low and heavy over the rusted rooftops of the mechanic yard. Jude lay half asleep, the ache of honest labor cradling him like a lullaby. For the first time in years, he had peace, no meetings, no headlines, no fake friends. Just grease, sweat, and silence. But peace is fragile, and tonight it shattered. It started with footsteps, not 1, not 2, 4, quick, deliberate. Then the gate creaked open. Jude sat up instantly. Something felt off. The quiet was too clean. Then he saw the glint metal in the dark. 3 men in black hoodies stormed the shack. No warnings, no threats. Just one mission. Kill Obasa. Jude stumbled back as a punch cracked against his jaw. He fell hard, his ribs screaming in protest. A boot slammed into his side. Alhaji sends his greetings, one growled. They dragged him outside. One raised a blade. Then, bang! A shotgun blast tore through the air. The men scattered as Samuel Adiemi stood by the gate, an old hunting gun in his shaking hands, eyes wide with fury. You think you're the only ones with enemies? Sam barked. Come back again, and I'll send you to meet them. Jude gasped for breath, clutching his side. Blood oozed from a cut above his eye. Sam dropped the gun, knelt beside him. You all right? He asked, eyes scanning for deeper wounds. Jude nodded weakly. You saved me. Again. Sam looked away, jaw tight. You still owe me. Don't die before you repay it. Police sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Too late as usual. But in that moment, something snapped inside Jude. Not fear, not anger. Resolve. He was done hiding. If his past wanted to kill him, then he'd face it. Head on. The next morning, Jude stood in the mirror of a cracked, oil-stained bathroom. His eye was swollen, lips split, and ribs still sore, but none of that mattered anymore. He had survived the gutter. He had tasted shame, swallowed pain, and stood at death's door. Now he was ready. He met Linda Ayula at a dusty cafe downtown. No security, no designer suits. Just a man stripped bare of pride. You still want my story? He asked. Linda nodded, recorder already rolling. For the first time, Jude Obasa told the truth. About the land deals, the bribes, the ghost companies, the people he crushed, the friends he betrayed. He didn't hold back. He gave names, dates, numbers. His voice didn't shake. By the time he was done, Linda sat stunned. This will destroy what's left of your name. He smiled faintly. Then maybe I can finally build something honest from the rubble. But just as he stepped out into the street, he saw her. A woman in a headscarf standing across the road, staring at him with tear-filled eyes. Modupe, his ex-wife. She crossed slowly. He stood frozen. I saw the article draft, she whispered. You're really doing it? He nodded. It's time. Then came the final blow. I lied, she said. I told people I left you because you were a monster. But that wasn't the full truth. Jude blinked. I was pregnant when I left, she whispered. You have a son. The air left his lungs. He's 10 now, and he knows nothing about the man you were. She stepped closer. Don't let him meet that man. Let him meet this one. Then she turned and walked away, leaving Jude standing there, shaking, speechless and reborn. He wasn't just fighting for redemption now. He was fighting for legacy. The article went live at 7 a.m. sharp. By 7:03, it was trending across Nigeria. Hash Obasa unmasked, hash redemption or ruin, hash he told the truth. The expose, written by Linda Ayula, wasn't a takedown, it was a confession. A man once feared and hated had opened his wounds to the public, naming names, exposing corruption, and surrendering the last shred of power he once held. And yet, the people didn't respond with only anger. They responded with awe. Because buried in the article were photos of Jude fixing cars in the sun, covered in grease, talking to street kids, cleaning wounds after the attack, building a shelter with his own hands for displaced apprentices. He didn't beg for forgiveness. He earned it. Samuel watched the story unfold on a cheap Android phone, eyes misty. For the first time in years, he felt peace. Jude had paid his debt not in naira, but in humility. And then came the moment. Jude stood outside a school in Surulere. His shirt was clean, but plain. No entourage, no Rolex, just a man waiting. The school bell rang. Children poured out, laughing, running. And then a boy walked toward him, tall, curious, eyes sharp as eyes. The boy paused. "Are you my dad?" Jude's voice caught. He knelt. "If you'll have me." The boy nodded slowly. "Mom said you changed." "I'm still trying," Jude whispered. "Every day." They hugged, awkward at first, then tighter. It wasn't perfect. It was real. Later, Jude walked alone past a man begging on the street. Their eyes met. Jude reached into his pocket, pulled out a crumpled N500 note, and placed it gently into the man's hand. No cameras, no audience. Just compassion. Because the man who once played God had finally learned how to be human. What did you think of Jude Obasa's journey from power to humility? Did the ending hit you in the feels? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's talk redemption, karma, and whether or not you think he truly changed. And hey, if you love this story and want more raw, emotional, unforgettable tales like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next epic story drop.